We cannot reverse Brexit. I thought of calling this video "We should stop talking about Brexit." I've not called it that, and I will explain why. I do welcome people from all sides of the argument to view the video. Maybe we can have a constructive discussion in the comments. Maybe we can even find points of agreement. I will touch on "You lost, get over it," and "We told you so." And, you know, I am of the view that people don't generally get persuaded by being abused, and that reasonable discussion can be useful. Let's see. Let me explain why I say, first of all, that we cannot reverse Brexit, and then I'll make a number of observations. So, some changes are reversible. I can open this box of matches. I can take out a match. I've made a change. I can put the match back in again. To all intents and purposes, we're pretty much back where we were. But if I open the box of matches and strike a match, then whatever I do now, I cannot reverse that change. So some changes are reversible, some are not. I view Brexit as an irreversible change. Let me put that to one side for a moment. I'll come back to it. Let's take an example of, can we reverse the 2019 general election? By our constitutional processes, the Conservatives were elected into government with a majority of 80, using our first past the post system. Can we reverse that? No, we can't. The Conservatives were elected. They enacted various legislation, Brexit, for example. That can never be changed. We can have a further election in which a different government is elected, but that does not reverse the effects of the 2019 election. So, in the case of Brexit, the referendum happened. That's a historical fact, 23rd of June 2016. It was an advisory referendum. That's another fact. Never mind what anybody said or didn't say or wrote or didn't write beforehand. The question in law is it was an advisory referendum. It didn't automatically trigger Article 50. However, the Conservative government, or different Conservative governments, did trigger Article 50 and eventually complete the process, and the UK left the EU on 31st of January 2020. Now, I think the response of "You lost, get over it" is perhaps concerned that some people who are in favour of pro-European membership are imagining that those things have not happened. So a little bit like the Japanese soldiers who were found in the jungle well after the end of World War II, still considering that they were fighting World War II. And if that was the case, it would be reasonable to point out to people the facts that have actually occurred. To be honest, I don't see a load of people in that position of not recognising that it's actually happened. But fair enough, the realities do need to be faced. So what do we do now? What possibilities are open to us? I think we have to recognise that nothing is forever. Nothing is bound to be forever. Governments cannot bind future governments. So once we were outside the EU, before 1973, that state wasn't guaranteed to last forever. Then we were inside the EU, in 1973, and there was a confirmatory referendum in 1975. I'm sure that people in favour of Brexit would say that that state was not guaranteed to last forever. Neither is our current state. Interestingly, one of the arguments during the discussion about the second referendum, one of the arguments from some of the pro-Brexit people was, yes, you can have a second referendum. I remember Jacob Rees-Mogg saying this. You can have a second referendum, but only after the first referendum has been implemented. Well, I believe my understanding is that they're saying that they've got Brexit done, in which case that condition is satisfied. I'm not saying that another referendum should follow immediately. It's not the time for it, but that objection to it has therefore disappeared. Now, of course, the Tories might say Well, we haven't really got Brexit done. A lot of things are in something of a mess. David Frost doesn't even agree with the treaty that he negotiated himself. Um, and they could tell us plenty more about all the deficiencies of the current arrangement. And, I might happen to agree with them, but I understood that their position was that they got Brexit done. What we are left with, however, is a treaty that is clearly most unsatisfactory. This is not a stable situation. The Northern Ireland Protocol, its application is uncertain. The position of professionals in Europe, that position is uncertain. The position of EU citizens in the UK, there is much yet to be sorted out. Will the UK actually implement the Northern Ireland Protocol that it signed up to or not? There was no timescale provided by the British government for doing what they said they would do. So we are in a rather strange situation. Now, I do understand that arguing for rejoining the EU is not electorally attractive at the moment. This is something which has a timescale longer than a single electoral cycle, and that can make it electorally unattractive until the situation builds up to a point where the extent of problems, the emerging of more and more young people into the electorate makes it something that is more electorally attractive to the main political parties. But I do recognise at the moment that there are, the millions of people who are positive about EU membership are not very electorally represented. That's a fact of life. And I think, as I say, the unattractiveness during the electoral cycle is part of the issue. But let's look forward. I know there are some people who say, well, I'm not sure the EU would want the UK back in at the moment, or indeed are more definite, saying the EU definitely wouldn't want the current UK back in the EU. But we're not talking about tomorrow. We're not talking about a Britain led by a Boris Johnson Conservative government. This would only be possible, in my view, if we had a UK that was subject to significant reforms, that was much more democratically accountable, that the possibilities of corruption and stealing of public money had been significantly eliminated, because our level of democracy has gone down considerably over the time. If you look at the crony contracting, for example, the National Audit Office and the Good Law Project have identified. So we're not talking about Britain as it is. We're talking about a possible future Britain which had much more democratic accountability, would eliminated the kind of causes of corruption that we've seen. This would be a very different UK. If that doesn't happen, then I would tend to agree there's very little chance of us rejoining the EU. And people have said, but Britain would have to adopt the euro and the Schengen. Well, there are countries in the EU that have not got the euro. I know there's the rule about new members, but I'm not making particular predictions. However, I think it's difficult for anybody to make predictions about what a future generation of MEPs, some of whom are not in the European Parliament at all at the moment, but might be in positions of power at the time that this got considered. Some of the MEPs in the Parliament then might be at school at the moment, learning about these things in terms of politics and constitution. So if you can predict what those people's attitude to a future UK would be, then you've got a much better crystal ball than I have. All I will say is that it's possible. I do want to get back to this question of, so I mentioned you lost Get Over It, but also I told you so. I think we have to look at these things in the circumstances of the time. I have elsewhere told the little anecdote of how I was in a position commercially some 35 years ago of seeking to work with organisations that had made one particular decision and seeking to move them in a very different direction to persuade them that that was beneficial to them. What I quickly learned was that, I don't think I ever said it quite like this, but what didn't work was to say, you made an idiotic decision 5 years ago, whatever it was, and you really should consider that. what was more effective, and I'm saying really was, I'm talking about in terms of achieved sales targets, what was more effective was to say a decision was made by this organisation several years ago, and in the circumstances of the time, there are reasons why that decision was made. It's worth looking at that in the current circumstances. Let's see what's changed. Let's see what factors now apply, and let's try and make a rational decision for now. Because the first approach of "you were idiots" effectively disrespects the intellect of the person that you're talking to, even though you're now trying to appeal to that intellect to make a further decision. But the second approach respects the intellect. Now, I know it's a question of emotion as well as intellect, and actually both those approaches have an impact on the emotions as well. So I'm certainly not denying the emotional side of it. But personally, I don't think "I told you so" is very helpful. I don't think "you lost, get over it" is very helpful. But perhaps we can look together at the situation that we're in and have constructive discussions about, given that the treaty was rushed through and the Tories said they would do it in a year, or 11 months, which clearly was not enough, and David Frost's reaction tells us that, and that we're in a mess now. How can we move forward from the current situation? And maybe some constructive engagement around that. Obviously, there are solutions such as rejoining the single market and the customs union that would solve an enormous number of the current problems. But hey, maybe people in proposing Brexit have got other alternatives to that. But if we could have some constructive discussions about that, maybe that would be beneficial for the country. We can't change history. There may be some things to learn about the Brexit process, some lessons to learn. Some aspects of that were a one-off, maybe would never occur again. But certainly there may be things to learn about, electoral advertising and accuracy of claims made during a voting process. So I'm not denying the possibility of lessons learned, and that's why I won't say, well, we shouldn't talk about Brexit at all. But Brexit was an event. It happened in the past. We can't reverse Brexit. We can look forward to say, what is the way forward for this country, given that the process so far pursued by the Tories hasn't proved very productive, and we will see that increasingly in time to come. Then what is the actual way forward, and can we have some constructive engagement around that? So yes, Brexiters recognising we can't reverse Brexit, but what constructively can we do in terms of sorting out Britain's trade and relationships with Europe and cooperation, and finding ways to solve some of the problems with trade and services across Europe and travel and so on that the Brexit process has not solved. Interested in your comments, and if you feel this has been useful, please subscribe to the channel.